The door was opened for him immediately, but the barman gave a start, backed away, and did not enter at once. This was understandable. The door had been opened by a girl who was wearing nothing but a coquettish little lacy apron and a white fichu on her head. On her feet, however, she had golden slippers. The girl was distinguished by an irreproachable figure, and the only thing that might have been considered a defect in her appearance was the purple scar on her neck. "Well, come in then, since you rang," said the girl, fixing her lewd green eyes on the barman. Andrei Fokich gasped, blinked his eyes, and stepped into the front hall, taking off his hat. Just then the telephone in the front hall rang. The shameless maid put one foot on a chair, picked up the receiver, and into it said, "Hello." The barman, not knowing where to look, stood shifting from one foot to the other, thinking. Some maid this foreigner's got. "Pah, nasty thing." And to save himself from the nasty thing, he began casting sidelong glances around him. The whole big and semi-dark hall was cluttered with unusual objects and clothing. Thus, thrown over the back of a chair was a funereal cloak lined with fiery cloth, on the pier glass table lay a long sword with a gleaming gold hilt. Three swords with silver hilts stood in the corner like mere umbrellas or canes. And on the staghorns hung berets with eagle feathers. "Yes," the maid was saying into the telephone. "How's that?" "Baron Magel? I'm listening." "Yes. Mr. Artiste is at home today." "Yes, he'll be glad to see you." "Yes, guests a tailcoat or a black suit." "What, by 12 midnight?" Having finished the conversation, the maid hung up the receiver and turned to the barman. "What would you like?" "I must see the citizen artiste." "What, you mean him himself?" "Himself," the barman replied sorrowfully. "I'll ask," the maid said with visible hesitation and, opening the door to the late Berlioz's study, announced, "Knight, there's a little man here who says he must see Messier." "Let him come in," Korovyev's cracked voice came from the study. "Go into the living room," the girl said as simply as if she were dressed like anyone else, opened the door to the living room, and herself left the hall. Going in where he was invited, the barman even forgot his business, so greatly was he struck by the decor of the room. Through the stained glass of the big windows, a fantasy of the jeweler's utterly vanished wife, poured an unusual, church-like light. Logs were blazing in the huge antique fireplace, despite the hot spring day. And yet it was not the least bit hot in the room, and even quite the contrary. On entering, one was enveloped in some sort of dankness as in a cellar. On a tiger skin in front of the fireplace sat a huge black tomcat, squinting good-naturedly at the fire. There was a table at the sight of which the God-fearing barman gave a start. The table was covered with church brocade. On the brocade tablecloth stood a host of bottles, round-bellied, moldy and dusty. Among the bottles gleamed a dish, and it was obvious at once that it was of pure gold. At the fireplace a small red-haired fellow with a knife in his belt was roasting pieces of meat on a long steel sword, and the juice dripped into the fire, and the smoke went up the flue. There was a smell not only of roasting meat, but also of some very strong perfume and incense, and it flashed in the barman's mind, for he already knew of Berlioz's death and his place of residence from the newspapers, that this might, for all he knew, be a church panakita that was being served for Berlioz, which thought, however, he drove away at once as a priori absurd. The astounded barman unexpectedly heard a heavy bass. "Well, sir, what can I do for you?" And here the barman discovered in the shadows the one he wanted. The black magician was sprawled on some boundless sofa, low, with pillows scattered over it. As it seemed to the barman, the artiste was wearing only black underwear and black pointed shoes. "I," the barman began bitterly, "am the manager of the buffet at the Variety Theatre." The artiste stretched out his hand, stones flashing on its fingers, as if stopping the barman's mouth, and spoke with great ardor. "No, no, no. Not a word more. Never and by no means. Nothing from your buffet will ever pass my lips. I, my esteemed sir, walked past your stand yesterday, and even now I am unable to forget either the sturgeon or the feta cheese. My precious man. Feta cheese is never green in color, someone has tricked you. It ought to be white. Yes, and the tea?